New Orleans Saints and the Minnesota Vikings. This is a cheap 3 or an expensive 2.5. Actually, there's a flat 2.5 available out there too, in favor of the Saints on the road at the Vikings. 41 is your total, though there are a couple 40.5s. We do know that Josh Dobbs is going to take over as quarterback for the Vikings in this thing. And, it's got to be better than what they were going to do with a 5th-round rookie. That being said, it's still only a week and a half in the system. Steven, what do you have here as we look as Saints? Look, there's actually a 2.5, so we can call it 2.5, and we can call it 3 if you like the Viking side.
Okay, so all year we've been a little skeptical of the Saints offense. For a long period of time, they had massive trouble getting into the end zone once they reached the red zone. They've solved that a little bit on goal-to-go situations by utilizing Taysom Hill more as a runner. And then they have games like last week where they're +5 in the turnover margin and still don't cover the touchdown and the hook spread. It's just mind-boggling that they can have games like this offensively. And at the same time, I don't really want to back Minnesota and Josh Dobbs, still without Justin Jefferson, with Kamara as a great check down option against all of these blitzes that Minnesota's doing most every single week. I think it's a bad matchup for Minnesota. As good of a story as Josh Dobbs was last week coming in out of nowhere, and Kevin O'Connell doing one of the more impressive coaching jobs in a single game I've ever seen. I can't get there to kind of take them basically to win the game if we're looking at 2.5. There are some 3s, so that's a little different. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. I took a teaser leg on Minnesota earlier in the week this week. Still feel okay about it just because of what we know about the New Orleans offense, but I don't feel great about it. And I think it's because there was a lot of smoke and mirrors with that Vikings win last week against the Falcons, where they could have easily been down 3 or 4 scores in the beginning of that game before Atlanta kept them in it with their own red zone woes.
Yeah, Adam, no Jefferson this week. They did open the window. Likely next week seems to be what they're thinking with Jefferson, but no Jefferson this week. KJ Osborne yet to clear the concussion protocol as well. Looks like TJ Hawkinson is going to go, but his ribs are at least going to be tender.
So I'm actually in on Minnesota here, and it's a bit of a fade of New Orleans. We think this New Orleans team is really a team that is get it done with the defense and get just enough out of the offense, right? Last 4 weeks, if you go look at the defense, by the same numbers that I always talk about, if I'm going to take the garbage time out, I'm going to use EPA. The number 1 defense in the league, as in the number 1 worst defense in the league, is the New Orleans Saints. Better said, 32nd. The number 3 defense in the league by the exact same numbers is the Minnesota Vikings. The second most blitzing team in the league is the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to talk about the most blitzing team in just a minute. The second most blitzing team is the Minnesota Vikings. And we know that Derek Carr is a quarterback where if you can make him move his feet, he is not the same player. Now, it's a bit high risk in terms of a handicap because if Derek Carr is going to have a bunch of one-on-one matchups, then that could be something that's a little more dangerous because we've seen that when the Saints can get good matchups, they have the receivers to win one-on-one. But this, to me, overall is a fade of the Saints defense. I'm looking at this game, and even with adjusting for Josh Dobbs, I have this game with the home field environment at Minnesota 1, and we're sitting 2.5 on New Orleans here right now. It's one of the biggest home field advantages in the league, and I would take the 3 with Minnesota if you want to go Stevens' way and go +8.5 on a teaser leg with the 2.5s that are still out there. That makes plenty of sense to me as well, because I think the one thing we definitely can establish is that against a quality opponent, I don't see how New Orleans is running out of the gym on anyone, considering the fact that this defense has been as bad as it has.
Yeah, don't hate the teaser leg. I will say I'm in on the Saints at 2.5. And basically what it comes down to is it's a quarterback who's been there for a week and a half without without anyone to throw to other than Jordan Addison. I mean, I think Hawkinson's going to play. I think Hawkinson's going to be on a pitch count. Like, apparently, if you read some of the beat reporter stuff out there, Hawkinson looked very stiff out of practice this week. I mean, it was apparently a pretty decent little rib injury that's going on with him. Look, they're going to give him the good stuff. He's going to get shot up. It'll be okay. But I mean, how many of those shots can he actually take, and how many snaps is he actually going to play? I looked at it. My handicap basically came down to this: is that Minnesota has no run game at all anyway, and you can't run against the Saints. Like, the Saints do have a very, very stiff run defense. And so I do wonder if you take a guy who's been on a team for a week and a half and you make him one-dimensional, and the team knows that they're going to have to throw the ball in order to move the ball, how effective he can actually be. And that is basically what it came down to with me in this one. I do think Lattimore can probably, I don't know for sure that they will use him in a shadow situation against Addison, but if that's the case, then I do wonder the effectiveness of all these kind of like, C-level, D-level receivers that they're going to have to run out there with a guy, again, that's been in town for a week and a half. And so I am in on the Saints 2.5. I don't love it, but I think, to me, it was one of those where all signs kind of point to, is there a bigger path for a guy that, in my opinion, that's been there for a week and a half to have a rough day throwing the ball to a bunch of nobodies than it is for the Saints to be able to cover a very small spread in 2.5. And so that was the handicap for me. So I do have Saints 2.5 in the account.
You mentioned Lattimore.
Yeah.
Just one last note. You mentioned Lattimore. I think we also need to, introduce the world here, if they haven't already, to Paulson Adebo, their other corner, who is the number 2 graded corner by PFF. I believe he has the best passer rating allowed this year for the Saints defense. So 2 fantastic options to try and take away Addison on an offense missing Jetta, Hawkinson banged up. So again, another reason why I'm concerned, even though I do have the teaser leg.
Yeah, I don't think the Saints win at margin, though. Like, so I think the teaser leg's fine. I mean, it's just, Saints just aren't built to win at margin right now, right? It's like, unless they magically figure out how to score, like you said, in the red zone, which I think that
when they did a couple of weeks ago, it was because they hit explosive plays against the Colts. They scored from outside the red zone.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's cute what they're doing with Taysom Hill, but I mean, how effective is that really going to be in the long term? And so, yeah, I don't think they win at margin. 2.5, though, just wasn't. I couldn't quite get there.
That's fair
with this one. Yeah.